Hello, everybody out there on the internet, YouTube, wherever you're watching. This is Matt Orozco, and I'm joined by the always lovely Lowell. Hey, Lowell.
Hello, Matt.
Nice to see you. Oh, I didn't hear you there, Lowell. What'd you say?
And our esteemed guests. That's
yes,
a professional segue for our very first guests for this. You're witnessing history here.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Lowell is also middle name is Transition King, so you know he's good for it. But we are in fact joined by two amazing folks today to help talk about a new documentary, FREDHEADS, that's coming out. And while we would probably do an inferior job trying to introduce them, we'll let them introduce themselves. So Paige, we'll start with you, and then Kim will go over to you.
Hi, I am Paige Troxell. I am the co-director and co-editor of FREDHEADS the documentary.
Oh, I guess it's on me now. I'm Kim Gunzinger, co-director, and a little bit of co-editing, but mostly co-director and producer for FREDHEADS the documentary.
Outstanding. It's nice to have you both. And I want to make a shout out to Lowell here, because not only is he starring in the documentary, but he helped to facilitate this connection. And we could not be more grateful for you all to take the time to spend with us, not just on our monthly show to talk about the documentary. And I think most interestingly, we're going to be ranking the Nightmare sequels. So we're going to see kind of from your all's expert opinions where you put the ones that fall after the first. Lowell, anything to add from your side?
No, I'm just glad this actually happened. I'm submitted myself to FREDHEADS like years ago and followed the Indiegogo, and I've seen it, no spoilers, but I can't wait to have it on my shelf right next to the I Am Nancy documentary that I got, that I found out on a podcast, and I'm like, oh my God, I need that right now. And I had it 2 days later. But yeah, this is exciting. Matt is one of the few people that I geek out with horror specifically. But I've never had a concentrated geek out or even quasi deep discussion of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So this is kind of major for me. Also, let me know if you could hear my dog in the background.
It's okay. We live in a world that is now almost entirely blended between professional and personal. So dogs barking, babies crying, as long as there's no one screaming for help in the background, I think the level of concern resides at a very normal level. So
I'm happy to hear that bar. No screams.
Well, I can't guarantee anything here in Ohio, but you never know. So Kim and Paige, it's so wonderful to have you both. As Lowell said, we both have watched the documentary. We will avoid spoilers because I think it's something that people should experience without anyone telling them what to expect. Like any film documentary, they're best going in with your own expectations and not anyone trying to tell you what to think or feel. But could you kind of give us a real quick kind of overview of the documentary, what it's about, and how you both arrived at the idea to make it?
I feel like the documentary, I always say, it's the culmination of fans and the love of this community, and really how finding this community has essentially saved certain people's lives, and it's makes it more of a survival story instead of just the typical slasher film. And so I feel like this documentary is fans telling their story of why this whole franchise is important to them. And I feel like the Nightmare Stars had theirs. They did an introspective of all the films, and it's all so great. And then now we have ours. The fans get to share their stories.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how it started. I mean, in the very beginning, we knew we wanted to do something. We wanted to do something to honor Wes. We wanted to do something that showed, our group of friends, even Paige and myself, we only met through conventions because of our love for Nightmare on Elm Street. And we really wanted to do something. And it's funny, when you start making a documentary, you don't really know where the story is going to lead you. And through filming and getting different fan stories that were submitted, we kind of went into another direction that we didn't anticipate, but we're both very happy, of course. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that we learned the most in filming of this is that like we went into it thinking, this is what we're going to show. We're going to find these types of fans. We're going to showcase this. We're going to showcase their collections and their tattoos. And when we opened up submissions, we had just like a very simple list of questions. And then we had like a bunch of bonus questions. So here are the top 10 we want you to answer. And then here are all the bonus questions. Most people went through the top 10 and were like, okay, boom, 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 and then latched onto certain bonus questions. And as we were getting footage in, Kim and I sat down and went through hours and hours and hours and days footage, categorizing like everything. And the general consensus of what all of the fans were sending in was that this was survival for them. And we were like, whoa, 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 there's a deeper story there. And so then we took like another year to really delve into it and see what it was. And I love what we have right now.
Yeah, I will say that it definitely, it's always interesting, I think, from the perspective of when you're making a feature film versus a documentary, that, you know, with a feature film, you try and adjust for all variables so that you're not surprised on set, because that can be somewhat of a derailment to production and timelines. Whereas a documentary, you almost kind of go the opposite direction, where you have a hypothesis. It's like research in that way, where you're trying to figure out, hey, I have a perception of what I think I might learn, but what I'm actually going to learn might either fly in the face of what I thought, or validate my opinion, or take me in a totally different way of thinking. So I think it's really great to hear that you all let the fans kind of dictate the narrative, as opposed to trying to take what you wanted to get out of it and then, you know, focus that entirely as the output. And I don't want to hog up all the air on this stuff. So I think Lowell and I are going to go back and forth on questions. So it's not just me, because if you give me an inch, I'll take 10 miles and you won't ever see me again. So we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of wondering about the boots on the ground approach that you guys have. I mean, one of the things that I like about the film, of course, that I'm in it, I'm biased, but I love that it's almost kind of like a commercial for conventions, you know, because I think, you know, Comic-Con is huge, but those smaller conventions, I think maybe for some fans, there's still a little stigma to that. And I didn't start going to cons semi-regularly until like the past few years. And you really capture, like, you know, the community essence of it, you know, kind of like a rock concert, except you're all like walking the floor together and like finding people. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, you know, you're sort of discovering it as you go along, but did you sort of sit down with all the convention footage and try to make something of it? Or was it more like you got a bunch of I sound so professional. And you got this whole lot of convention footage and thought, no, we need to go deeper into this. Let's go to this con and this con. I almost joined you at the Parsippany one. I know that hotel center, and I'm like, I can't do it that weekend. But how was your approach? How was the con aspect approach for you guys?
I can take that, Paige.
Yeah, I don't think I'm.
So in the beginning, we had in mind, you know, we wanted to do a couple cons that, you know, we had, of course, in mind, based around, of course, them having the Nightmare cast there, because obviously if the Nightmare cast is there, you're going to have more Nightmare fans. But once we started filming and we got some footage from these conventions and even some like screenings, there were like special screenings in like Columbus and things like that of the movie itself. And, you know, we took those opportunities to get fans. I remember saying to Paige, we need to do more. We need to branch out. We can't just focus on the Midwest conventions. Like, we need to try to, I guess, get a bigger pool, a sample pool, right? So that's when we decided, okay, we'll take a little bit more time filming. And, you know, we added a couple more conventions. You know, we were able to go to Texas Frightmare, which was a lot of fun because it was a bucket list or bucket con for me personally. And we, you know, went to Scarefest as well. So we tried to, I guess, get a bigger pool of fans, I guess you could say. But we didn't, it's funny because we got all this footage and in our minds we're like, oh, you know, this is great stuff. But we really didn't know what we had until we sat down to kind of review the footage. I think we started really reviewing everything we had with notebooks in hand, taking notes about 2019. And that's when we realized, oh my gosh, you know, this story is morphing. So yeah, the conventions were a big thing because that's, you know, where most of us get together. And, you know, that's how our little group met, was through the convention scene. So
we also had so much footage from the conventions because we had several people filming on the conventions. And so we would sit there and we would be like, okay, somebody's talking about this. We know there was a camera at this moment at the convention, but Jeremy talks about a moment where the cameras are following them. That was easy for us then to dial in because we're like, all right, let's build the story around that and around that convention, around that piece. We feature Monster Mania, Chiller, Horror Hound, Days of the Dead, Texas Frightmare, and Spooky Empire, and not Spooky Empire. We Scarefest. We couldn't make it to Spooky Empire, and so our goal was to hopefully not showcase one more than the other, but we ended up showcasing one a little bit more than the other. But was to really show how the culture in these, whether it's, you know, in the Midwest or in Texas or anything, it's still that fandom culture, and we hope that's what came through in showcasing the convention footage.
Definitely.
Yeah, I could say that it definitely felt that way. And it was almost like you're going to the cons, even if you've never been to one, you kind of get a taste of that experience, which can be so hyper. I mean, as someone with anxiety, like it's kind of it's a blessing and a burden because it's like really exciting, but then I'm like, oh shit, I'm in it now. And so kind of getting over that hump is like a really important part of it, but sometimes being able to observe from afar can be an ideal experience. And I wanted to mention that, you know, congratulations to you all that you'll be premiering FREDHEADS, the documentary, at HORRORHOUND this year in Cincinnati in September. So we're excited that Macabre Daily will actually be there for both Scarefest and HORRORHOUND this year. So we're excited to be there in support. And it's just amazing that, you know, you all are going to be premiering at one of the kind of conventions that is such a cornerstone of the documentary itself. And as you were going through this, you know, there's this, you mentioned the IAV community, and I think this is so potent because I feel very comfortable saying, based on the stories shared in the documentary, and again, not giving much away here because I think it's really something that people need to experience, especially if you've been a long-time horror fan, is I think I found myself nodding along a lot of people's stories about how they got to horror. And it's so interesting that there's so much overlap in our experience that brings us to this genre. And in this case, Nightmare on Elm Street. And I was curious, you know, for your all's perspective, what do you think that reason is beyond like the community aspect's important, but why does horror attract people who have been made to feel othered in their life so much?
I feel like Kim would be the perfect person to answer this. She always has like a brilliant answer for this, so I'm gonna let her take this one.
No, put me on the spot or anything.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, no. So I think, I mean, personally for me, you know, my story is a little different and everybody's is a little different, you know, but I wasn't allowed to watch that kind of stuff. You know, it was like that taboo thing, you know, and as I got older, the passion just came out. Like that's all I wanted to watch. It's all I wanted to see. You know, I didn't care about playing with Barbies or, you know, anything like that. Like I wanted to watch scary movies that I wasn't allowed to watch, basically. But I think for a lot of people, it does come into kind of a survival mechanism. Like you are putting yourself, I call it the roller coaster effect, right? You're putting yourself in that seat, but you know it's safe. You know, some people, maybe they're going to walk away, you know, like, oh, I'm not going to ever do that if I'm in a, you know, a situation, you know, so it could be like a survival aspect. But I just, like I call it the roller coaster effect. You know, you're putting yourself in that spot to experience that anxiety or that tension, but you know it's still a safe space because you're sitting on the couch at home and you know that you can turn it off at any moment and, you know, go on with your life or apply it to your life. I think a lot of people do take scary movies, you know, and not just scary movies. I mean, this goes back to the dawn of mankind. If you think about it, you know, we've always used kind of like horrific tales to teach and to grow. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
And I think that like people who in particular were bullied or were the outcasts, I think the reason why they're so drawn to it is because they can, in a sense, live out their trauma through it. And you can see yourself in other people, particularly in Nightmare. I'm not a huge fan of like the other genres. I don't know a whole lot about Friday the 13th. I only know a little bit about Halloween because my friends and my husband are. But for me, the reason why I think I connected with Nightmare, and I think that the reason why other people do, is because it's not necessarily that you're seeing yourself in Freddy Krueger. It's fun to watch. He's fun to be on screen. He takes, you know, your mind away from things. But a lot of people resonate with the kids and the characters, and they resonate with, you know, the person who's bullied, or like for me, like I resonated with like Sheila, right? Like I was nerdy, I had glasses, I have asthma, and I think people just see that and just connect on a different way. And these films are written so much, I want to say, smarter than other horror films, and not to insult any other horror films, but I think it's because of who Wes Craven is because he was a huge scholar. And so he actually was putting thought and meaning behind his characters instead of just a girl running down the street getting killed, you know, and that's why people, I think, relate to it. For me, that's what connected me with horror, at least. And from getting these stories from people, it's clear that's kind of like what they've connected as well, too.
Yeah. And some people connect to other characters more than, you know, others. So like Paige is saying, like, there's, I guess, a more variety of believable characters that, you know, anybody can like, oh, I relate to Sheila, or I relate to Kincaid, or I relate to Kristen. You know, there's like, I guess, that broad pick, for lack of a better word.
I was the kid who loved comic books and crushed a lot then. But I did not get crushed, but I did crush a lot. So, yeah. But to segue into that, I mean, I want to know, and this will be my last question because I want to get into the rankings because I'm selfish like that. But when you're putting a Nightmare on Elm Street documentary together, you know, to your boilerplate horror fan, maybe they hear that and they think, oh, you're going to make a movie about Freddy. And Freddy is absolutely represented. Like, you go into the genius and the awesomeness of Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger, but I love the emphasis on the, like you said, the kids too. I mean, these aren't just like, you know, random horny teens going to the wood getting killed one by one. Like, the films go out of their way to make you care about them. And I love the section on Nancy and all the talking head interviews you did. But I'm wondering, when you're editing it and you're thinking as filmmakers of putting it out into the world, do you think maybe we should put more Freddy in here at the expense of the kids just to make it more marketable? I mean, not that I think it would compromise what you're doing, but like, you know, as you didn't specifically make Freddy the face of the film, which I loved, and I'm just wondering if that was ever like a decision that you had to make, or if it's like, no, it was always about the kids. What are you talking about?
Yes and no.
Yeah, I would say yes and no.
Yeah, yes and no. It was always about the fans, right? And so for us, we let them guide the story. And honest to God, not a lot of people talked about Robert Englund or Freddy or their experience. They mainly talked about their experience with the other people, like Rick. A lot of people talked about Rick, and that kind of blew us away, that people were relating to them. Some people were talking about Kincaid and how they connected with Kincaid. We, unfortunately, cannot put everything in the documentary. When we originally had it edited, it was 3 hours and 6 minutes. And we were like, nobody's going to buy this for 3 hours and 6 minutes, and nobody's going to screen it. Well, some of us would. Like, I would, like a hardcore Nightmare fan. But
yeah.
I want to briefly interrupt you and just say that the Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street documentary, is
Yeah.
4 hours, and people watch that over and over again. And let me tell you, when I found out that the Friday the 13th documentary was like 8 hours, I was like, of course it's longer than the Nightmare on Elm Street one. Like, there's more films and more stuff to cover, but that's where I am. Make it 10.
So we understand that, because we were very much sticking to that as well too. We were very much like, we don't care if it's 3 hours, it's 3 hours. This is the story that we have to tell. But we got a lot of great feedback from people that like we respect in the industry, and a lot of them were saying like, it's great that all these fans are saying this, but it's repetitive because they all have the same story. And so we had to pick. It was very hard. It was a very brutal editing session that we went through, and we had to go through and say, is what this person saying adding to the story, or is what this person is saying adding to the story? And it was so hard to pick and choose between people, but nobody really, I mean, they were talking about Robert, everybody always talks about Robert, but nobody was really going into detail about it. And for us, like, FREDHEADS is the fans, not necessarily Freddy Krueger or Robert Englund. And, though both Freddy Krueger and Robert are in the documentary, it's a love for the entire franchise. And I think had we had more Freddy, had we had more people touching on that, there might have been more in the documentary. But really, truly, the editing was led by the fans. And that was almost a mistake that we made early on, not letting that happen. And we were in Heather Langenkamp's studio, and just on a trip, and we were kind of talking about it, and she was laughing at me and Kim because we put a timestamp on our trailer, and she's like, have you even started editing it yet? And I was like, well, I have like pockets of it edited. And she goes, well, what's your storyline? And Kim and I looked at each other, and I just was like, I don't know. I was like, I really don't know. And she said, you need to go through all the footage, and you need to open your eyes, and you will see what the story is, because you're going in with the intent of one thing, and the real story can be underlined in all of that. And then she goes, then you just need a hook to tie it all together. She goes, you just need a narration. And so Kim and I, it was like light bulbs went off in us, and we were like, okay, this is what we have to do. And so that the fans really guided what this documentary is. Their stories really guided this, and they just chose the other people. They chose to speak on the impact that Rick or Sheila or Alice, was a big one. People talked about Alice, and then obviously everybody talks about Nancy, and that's kind of the big hook that we can't wait for people to see, like how it starts with Freddy, and then it just carries throughout the rest of the cast. It's not just centrally focused on him. And so that's my thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's so interesting, because in a way, that's kind of what makes Nightmare on Elm Street a different series, is that you have a consistency in your main kind of killer with Robert Englund, whereas every other franchise has had varying degrees of consistency with who represents the main title role. And the only real the variance is you care more about the characters in Nightmare on Elm Street than you do in the characters in Halloween or Friday the 13th. Or, I mean, the only exception I would even put out there is Child's Play, but that's because it is, for the first 3 films particularly, there's a singular through line for them. And so it kind of makes sense that, the fans respond to the characters more, because those characters, not only have you all said they feel more realistic, but they're more compassionate than your average slasher kind of characters drawn out. They're a little bit more fully baked. They're much more real in how they act and their
More
issues.
sensitive, more aware of the world around them.
Yeah.
And anyone that relates to Freddy is a sociopath. Like, it's kind of like, you kind of don't want to. So, I mean, again, you could love Freddy, like people love Jason and Michael Myers, but like, there's no one that's like, God, I really respond to how Freddy haunts people's dreams because that's a goal of mine. Like, that's a really weird thing to say.
It's on my dream.
Hold on, you'd be surprised.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Those did not make it into the documentary, but there were a couple fans who we were maybe like, should we like notify that fan?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. There is one fan in it that does say something really funny in regards to it, and we like hope people catch it. So I don't want to like spoil it on here, but she's essentially saying how cool Freddy is and the things that he can do. There's a joke in it, and we laugh every time, but we debated, should we take this out? And I was like, no, she said it, and it's hilarious. Like, let's leave this in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's again, I think it's just it all makes sense what you've all said about how the storyline kind of emerged through the footage and how it came back to the fans, and that's so like it's a testament, I think, to someone like Heather Langenkamp's character, that not only does she show up to all these cons with a big smile on her face and like willing to, you know, show the support that people bring in kind, but that she was being willing to kind of give you, you know, help you find that storyline and give you that advice. And more importantly, you need people to be candid with you in the editing process, or else you end up with something that, you know, you wish you could have done differently. And then I think the last question I have before we go into our rankings is just, you know, what was the most interesting or unique piece of merchandise or collectible that you all saw? Because there are some impressive collections in this. And it also speaks to just the commercialization of Freddy in relation to his peers. Like, he's way more commercially viable. So I was just curious, like, if there's any particular piece of merch or item that really stood out, like, I've never seen that before, and that's either grotesque or that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I'm going to start this one. So we actually went to one of our good friend's house, and his nightmare, I mean, his collection's amazing, but his nightmare collection was beyond amazing. It was, I don't, Paige, you can help me out. The problem that we had, we were so excited when we got there and we saw everything, we didn't realize that there was actually music, sorry about the dog. There was actually music playing in the background, so we weren't able to use any of the footage in the actual documentary. Like, no!
And so what we ended up doing is we have a few bonus features for when we eventually do when it eventually is out for wide release on DVD and Blu-ray. We have like some few bonus features, and we put a bonus feature of him together, because for the actual film, for it to be released and when it starts streaming and all of that, it could not clear copyright. Like, we're talking like Dokken, Tuesday Night is playing, and we were so impressed with his collection that like we were like blown away. We didn't even realize the music was playing, because we were like standing in this room. It was like a pit. You like walk in and it was like the entire room, everything on the walls, on the floors. Like, he had spaces just for us to walk in, and he had things that we've never seen before. Like he had like a lighter, like a Freddy Krueger lighter.
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up. I was like, a lighter? Like, out of all the things he had, I'd never seen a lighter, and I felt so stupid that I made like such a big deal out of a stupid lighter. But I never seen
it was like the coolest thing. Like he flicked it and like the flames like came out of his hat or something. Like it was really, we had never seen it. And then what else did he had like the like sculptures like for Christmas, you know, that people put on like their fireplace and stuff like that. He had like Weston Hills. He used to have the Elm Street house. Apparently a company made them years ago. And he had like the whole set, like things I have never seen in person or have seen or even would have thought to have seen he had. It was so cool. We couldn't use any of it. Like any of it.
Sorry.
That's so unfortunate. I mean, it is what that is. I mean, as we post this to YouTube, we've also had copyright notices sent to us for music that we thought was royalty free. So there's just so many checks and balances there. And those little like Christmas tree, like, or I don't want to call them like Christmas village versions of like horror houses go for insane amounts of money. They're really hard. I tried finding the Michael Myers house one. I was like, yeah, I don't make enough money to justify this to my wife or myself. So I'll have to pass. But now, thank you both for sharing a bit about the documentary. I know we want to get into the rankings of the sequels, and so to set the tone here, no rules as long as it's not the first one. So that's the only restriction. And we, as Lowell and I do this every month, the one thing I think we both come to the table with the mindset of is that it doesn't really matter if it's a commercial success. It's what we think is our favorite. And I think that that's the most interesting part about these is we all have a different reason why one is our favorite. And even if it's not the most successful or even the most well-liked one, there's a special place for it. So please, as we go through this, we'll start at the, the third, and then we'll go to second and first. And if just feel free to elaborate as to why, because I think that's also really part of this community is, and I think I'm not going to speak for anybody, but I'm 37 and I grew up at a time where horror community was not easy to access. And I grew up in a small Arizona town. And so as I've gotten older, the overwhelming amount of community that now exists is really impressive, but it also can be kind of overwhelming. And so I think sometimes just hearing when someone says, that's my favorite, when someone's like, I love Julian Sands and Warlock, I'm like, me too, brother. Like it's a weird movie, but you know what? I'll watch the hell out of it any day. So just hearing why sometimes make people feel like validated. And I think that at the end of the day, that's all we're really trying to feel is validated in our interests and likes. So we know we're not alone. So we'll just do like so Kim, Paige, Lowell, and then myself, and then we'll just keep going through that rotation if that works for you all.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I guess I'm kicking it off. Is that what I'm
so
hearing?
your third favorite sequel and why?
So third favorite. Okay. My third favorite would probably have to be part 4. I really like part 4. I love Alice's character. It comes down to the characters. I love, like I said, I love Alice's character, her brother, and just the whole dynamic of the group of friends. And I guess some people call it like the MTV Freddy. He's kind of like, he was like big. He had like all the funny one-liners. So I just think it's a fun one.
All right, number 4. I'm sure you're not alone there. So Paige, what's your third?
So my third is number 4. But I like a lot like what Kim said. I love it for the kids, but on a different aspect, I love the continuation of the story. I feel like a lot of horror film sequels don't go into the continuation of the story, like the little touches, like spoiler alert, you see like Nancy's grave, like those things from like the third film. And even though they joke that they're only in it for the first 10 minutes, I still love that like the Dream Warriors are in it, and it like passes the torch. It's the perfect way to continue on the series with a new crop of kids that can continue to grow and expand without them having to rely and be stuck on that you're the last of the Elm Street children, because how many Elm Street children can there really be? And so I love the 4th film is like the perfect continuation.
I love that, because there is a very continuity is not a cornerstone of slasher films or the horror genre at large. So the fact that they would even be willing, and I also appreciate, 4 is not my third. I'm going to pass it low in a second, but 4 is not my third. But I will say I have a lot of credit for a film that will kill off its previous cast and not hold on to it in perpetuity. Scream, looking at you guys, just saying, just cut them loose. But Lowell, over to you. What's your third?
Yeah, it's 4. It's 4. And I mean, maybe you guys probably know what my first 2 are as well, but we'll get to that. No, 4 is the apotheosis, I think, of the series in terms of like what Nightmare on Elm Street is and what it became. It's the most Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And it does have, I think, the best cast, and even though they don't have a lot of time to build those relationships, you can tell them. Like, you can tell Debbie and Sheila have been friends for a while. When I think of part 4, I think of the scenes of the kids in mourning, along with the special effects and the really cool deaths. I think of like Debbie outside of the school being like, what the hell is this? She had asthma. No Night Stalker's going to beat me. And like Alice running off in the hallway, like, oh my God, I did this. And Rick who's just like, okay, I don't know if I'm fully ready to believe this yet, but I know something is happening and I don't know what to do. I mean, the scene when they're watching that, the camcorder footage, that didn't need to be in the movie, but it's great. And it's one of the things that makes it. And it probably has the best soundtrack. And it was my favorite when I was a kid. You get me drunk enough and I can recite the first 10 minutes verbatim.
Note to self, liquor up Lowell next time we see each other. Well, I'm gonna throw throw a wrench in this for Love Fest and go with number 2, Freddy's Revenge. And there's a couple, and I know that this one is often maligned by the community, it's gotten a lot of respect back because of Mark Patton and, like, you know, his amazing Scream Queen documentary, which, again, if any Nightmare on Elm Street fan out there hasn't seen it, you should absolutely check it out, because it is as moving. Like, it's as the way I felt moved by Fredheads is very similar to how I felt watching Scream Queen, because you can tell how much passion is in there. But I saw Freddy's Revenge. I watched them sequentially when I was younger, and so I saw it. You know, I didn't see third before the second, or I saw the second, I saw the first, and I saw the second, and it freaked me out. Like, and it always felt different. Like, there's something to that where I saw it even at a young age, and I was like, I don't know why this is different, but this movie feels dangerous. Like, there's something to this. And maybe it was the way that Freddy broke the rules, maybe the way Freddy looked, even the fact that he's comically smaller than everybody else at the pool. There's just something really off about it. And when you listen, and then I love movies that with time, kind of with end context, get more enjoyable. And I think learning about the interpersonal issues, whether they were, and again, hearing the writer kind of try and make this really weak defense as to how he wrote the script, which ultimately really had a massive impact on Jesse's Mark. And so there was always something about it. And in revisiting it, it is kind of like Crispin Glover's dancing scene in one of the Friday the 13th movies. There's something about it that just makes it goofy and scary, but also really, like, there's not a lot of horror films talk about the friendship between two men. And the friendship that exists in that movie feels so much more genuine than so many other friendships you see in any genre. So there's just a lot of heart in that movie, that at the same time, some effect scenes that are absolutely kind of outrageous. I mean, when Freddy literally appears at the end, that is one of the best entrances you could ever have for a horror character in my mind. But there's also some things about it that, again, at the time, like the coach death scene, it stands out because it is so different. And it's hard to think that the writer didn't know what he was doing when he wrote that. But at the same time, there's something about that I don't know, something different. It does something different. And I still find some value in it. So that's my favorite.
I always said that part 2, I think Freddy was the scariest. I watched that one first. Actually, I didn't see part 1 first. I saw part 2 first, and I was like, "Oh my god, what the hell is that?" So, yeah, I can see that. So
he really is the scariest, I think, in part 2. Just even his look as well. I saw them all out of order as well too, and 2 was like one of the last ones that I saw. And I loved it. I've never, I understand when people, all their stuff. I love that, it has gotten the resurgence that it gets, because it is really a good film. If you look at it and watch it with knowing the genre now eyes, I say, and being more into intellectual, thinking when you watch horror films. I've started doing this recently where I started watching old horror films, and I'm like, wow, I see it totally different through new eyes, like you said. It really is. It's my number 4. So, so that's
we're not doing 4.
I know we're doing 3.
I know, if only we had the time, we do all of them, but we're showing
You
restraint.
come back too, by the way, if you have hours and hours. But yeah.
So Kim, what's your second favorite sequel in the series?
So my second is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So it's actually, for years I go back and forth between my first and my second, but I love Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I was, I'm 40 now, so I was a little older when that one came out. I remember the hype. I remember, the previews. I remember, there's another Freddy movie, so that was really the one that I guess I remember coming out. And then when I saw it, I was just completely blown away. Wes Craven has done it again. The man is a genius. He has broken the fourth wall. Freddy is real. He is out there. It is not just a movie anymore. And I absolutely love it for that reason. So, yeah.
That's actually my number 3 too, not to break the cipher, but I almost didn't include it on my list of sequels because it's outside of the continuity, but also it's so miles above. the rest of the series. Really, it's like the first really meta horror movie. And I think of it more as like a Ring style horror movie, like The Ring instead of a slasher film. Like I don't like put it on when I'm sick, like I would like Part 4 or my number 2. But it's genius. It's like, how did he think of this? Even to this day, all these years later, I still wonder about that. And it was the first horror film that I saw in the theaters, and the first movie I saw where the end credits, the opening credits come all the way at the end. And I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, and it just like blew my hair back when I had it. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, Paige, what's your? I agree with you, Lowell, but I'm gonna withhold until it's mine, because I have lots to say on New Nightmare. But Paige, what's your number 2?
So this is the problem. So if we're doing the franchise itself, I have an answer. But if we're doing just the Freddy films, I have an answer. So for me, I'm going to do the franchise. So my number 2 would have to be Dream Warriors. And to me, Dream Warriors is my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film. So it's my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film, but it's not my number 1 for the whole. And I love Dream Warriors. I love the camaraderie between all of the cast, the characters. I love that we get to see Nancy again. And I love that she's leading all of them. I love that she's smart. She's a heroine and she dies on the sword. And all of that was very symbolic for me as a kid. And that was my first horror film I ever saw. It was the first Nightmare film I ever saw. And it was the most watched Nightmare film I ever saw. But it's my number 2.
Wow. We'll definitely, I have a feeling we'll probably be talking about Dream Warriors again. So Lowell, what's your number 2 film?
My number 2 is Dream Warriors.
Hey.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I don't know what else there is to say about Dream Warriors or New Nightmare for that matter. But I mean, and I also, like a lot of people, I saw them out of order. So I saw 3 before 1. So my introduction to Nancy was her finishing the rhyme in the beginning. And that like activated something in me. I was like, holy shit, she knows what's going on, and she's an adult. There's an adult who knows what's going on. There's an adult who's not dumb. Oh my God. And I mean, yeah, Paige, everything you said, it's kind of like the best of like the older and newer Elm Street movies. It's that bridge where you have the camaraderie, you have the special effects, you have like really caring about those characters, and it's just like goddamn. And Dawkins, just fantastic.
Yeah, everyone loves a good Dawkins. I mean, and
yeah.
Just I can't even get my voice that high to even say Dream Warriors in that pitch, but trust me, I've tried, and you don't want to hear it. So I'm with Kim on this one. New Nightmare is my number 2, and I'll echo everything you say and only add that it is Wes Craven's genius knows no bounds. He has reinvented the genre so many times that it's, I mean, we love Carpenter on this show, and we will say no ill will, but Carpenter's aesthetic is what carries him through. But Craven challenges your perceived notion of horror and genre, and he does it from a place of experience and research and reality. But he also tries to push the envelope because he knows that what makes horror great is the lack of comfort you have while watching it. And taking that, I mean, any film that's going to even try and attempt a meta kind of commentary should always make sure to watch New Nightmare first to see how to do it, so you don't, one, overdo it, but B, make it really stick in a way that goes beyond the franchise. Like, it takes Freddy into a totally different realm. The redesign of Freddy is the best. That's my favorite Freddy look, because it's like, that's what I would imagine a demon who haunts your dreams to look like. And even though, and we lose sight of the fact that he's actually a person at some point, but in this, just there's the hospital scene is one of the best. The highway scene, I mean, that is unreal. And I still watch. It's not a comfort film because it's a very serious film, and I feel like that something like that is kind of hard to enjoy when you're at your maybe low points. But because it takes itself so seriously, it also kind of reverses or retroacts the what Freddy's character and persona had become, and reclaims the character in a way that no other franchise has been able to do with their killer, by bringing them into the realm. I mean, even Halloween from Blumhouse has not made Michael Myers to be taken seriously, because well, I'll just leave that there. But not New Nightmare is my number 2, and I love it dearly, and I'm glad others feel the same. So Kim, what's your favorite sequel across the franchise?
Dream Warriors, of course. It's my absolute, I love it. I've always loved it. From the acting to this, you know, it's funny, I was just watching it the other night. My boyfriend hasn't seen him since he was a kid, you know, and with the hype and everything, he's like, I want to rewatch them. I'm like, yes, let's rewatch them, you know. And just going back and like rewatching it with him, it gave me a sense of excitement. I found myself like watching him more, waiting for his reactions, you know. And I'm going to call him out, but when Philip, you know, when Freddy goes and does the swipe and Philip falls, like he laughed louder than I've heard anyone laugh before. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only weird person here. But no, I've always loved Dream Warriors, you know, and everything that has already been said by Paige and Lowell for their number 2, it's exactly that for me, plus the document, of course. So
Absolutely fair. What's yours, Paige? What's your favorite sequel?
So this might shock you guys and surprise you guys, but it's Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Wes Craven's New Nightmare to me is the best film in the entire series. I think it is a complete masterpiece. It is a masterclass in horror. There would be no Scream without Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And I think that it's just a really well done film. It's the one that I watched the most. I have the best memories with it ever, like seeing it for the first time. I remember I talk about it in the documentary about how my grandfather passed away and it affects me severely. But one of the stories that we cut was that my dad that same year my grandfather passed away is when Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out. And my uncle sat me down and he's like, sit down and watch this. And I was like, okay. And so I thought I was in trouble. And he puts in a VHS tape and it says Man's Best Friend from Blockbuster. And he puts it in and he hits play. And all of a sudden I start hearing Nancy. And I'm a kid. And I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, my uncle's got his like hands on my shoulder. He's like, just watch. And so I'm like, okay. And then it was the whole trailer for it. And I started crying. And I was like, rewind it. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's Nancy, but she doesn't know me. She's Nancy. And it was like a whole thing. I begged my dad to take me to see it on opening night. And I was the only kid in the theater. And I like sat like on the edge of like the seat, just like watching it, like watching my hero like kick Freddy's ass for like the last time. And I love this scene where like he says, pick a pet for the Rugrat bitch. And she like takes it and does his eye and says the thing. The entire audience jumped up cheering. I will forever have like the best like memory of seeing that. It's the only one I ever saw in theaters before Freddy vs. Jason, but I don't count that. And so it was like literally the best one. And to me, the freeway scene is the best scene in any film in history. To me, in any horror film, any film in history, is that freeway scene. And I think that for me, that film doesn't get the respect that it deserves. A lot of people now on like film Twitter are talking about it, and people, it's kind of getting a little bit of a resurgence, but it does not get the respect that it deserves. And I think the character of Heather Langenkamp, Nancy Thompson, doesn't get the respect that that character deserves either for that freeway scene. Like, who takes a hit like that and then is like, leave me alone, I need to save my son? Like, to me, it's just the ultimate, it's the ultimate movie. And Wes is just chef's kiss, a genius in it.
There's definitely a case to be made that that is one of his best films and the best film in the franchise. I still say the script for part one is like the perfect horror script. Like, structurally, it's just tight as a drum. But like New Nightmare, the zoom in on the badge is just and it's like, can you imagine him trying to sell that to people and they're like, wait, why are we zooming in on a badge? No, it's great, trust me. And they're like, all right, but it just, why are you calling me Nancy, John? Cross cut with him coming out of the sheets. I just Wes knew exactly what he was doing.
And he also gets very, like, he's just a misunderstood artist, frankly. Like, he never got the credit he deserved while he was alive to get it. You know, he made some money, which is certainly be fair, but yeah, he doesn't, I think he's one of them, next to Toby Hooper, probably one of the most underappreciated directors in the genre, let alone in of all time. But Lowell, what's your favorite sequel? I think I might know, but I'm gonna bet with myself.
Yeah, no, it's Dream Warriors. I could say some nice things about 5 to run out the clock if you want. No, but I 5 has aged better than a lot of other horror films of 1989. I will say that.
I love 5. I don't mean to interject with you, and we're not like crazy on a strict hour thing, so don't worry if we go a couple minutes over. But let me tell you, I love 5, and it does not get the respect it deserves. 5 is such a dark film. It is dark, it is scary, it's very well thought out. It's
mature.
Shot. It's a mature film. Like, it does not get the respect that it deserves at all. And I think it's because we've talked about this before in other like discussions and stuff, where it's because it came so hot off the height of 4, where Freddy was funny and he was the MTV Freddy and he was quirky, and so many people saw that film and thought this is who Freddy is. And when they came in to do 5 and wanted to revert him back, like, no, we don't want to go to 6, we don't want to go to Freddy's dead yet, right? So let's make it a little darker. I think had that film came before, like right after Dream Warriors, it would have been a huge success. It would have been critically accepted. It wouldn't have been, you know, panned by the fans. And I don't know, I love 5, Lowell. I'm with you. I love 5.
And it continues the story, you know, it goes from 3 to 4 to 5, continues the story really well. And yeah, I definitely have a love for it, for sure. I don't think anyone, not that I don't love all of them, because I do love all of them, don't get me wrong.
We all do. I mean, no shade on the, but like, you know, it's towards the bottom of my rankings, but still, it's got more wit, imagination than, you know, a ton of other movies. And I always said, like, 1988 was like the horror film year where everyone's like, they're doing their cocaine best. You know, you got Halloween 4, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Child's Play, and then 1989, it's Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan, Nightmare 5, and Halloween 5, and everyone's just kind of hungover and stumbling into the sunlight, you know. So, but
I will say, I wish they would bring Alice and Jacob back. So if there's anyone in Hollywood listening to this, take note, bring Alice and Jacob back.
You know,
we have an idea, so come to us first.
I read those Freddy versus Jason scripts where they do come back, and I was like, oh, what could have been? But honestly, part of me, I love Lisa Wilcox. I thought she should be a movie star like Julia Roberts and whoever in the 90s. But part of me is kind of happy that she gets away with Jacob at the end of 5. In my headcanon is Freddy's death happens because she leaves Springwood. Like, she's the only thing keeping him like contained. So when she pieces out, that's when he can come back. But you know what? She's the Dream Master. She's earned it.
I love that. I love that theory. Do you know there's a little tea about Freddy versus Jason with Lisa Wilcox, with you talking about it? Do you know they asked her to be in it, and she said, yeah, I would gladly, but they were going to make her pay for her own travel, her own room and board, and not even pay her to be in it.
The audacity.
So why
the audacity. She talked about it at a convention, and because they brought it up. Like, have you ever thought about bringing Alice back? Why weren't you back for Freddy versus Jason? And she talked about it, and there was a collective hush. Everyone was like, oh, like they could not believe it. And I think that filmmakers at that time didn't think retrospectively, like, okay, let's do this. We're just doing like a big. Now, if they were, I'm guarantee you they would bring back Alice and Jacob. And there's a way they could do it. Kim and I know a way.
Oh, absolutely.
I agree that 5 is super underappreciated by every measure. And it's interesting because the worst Nightmare on Elm Street sequel is better than most of like the other franchise sequels. Like, full stop. Like, it's not even a contest. And there is a level of consistency to the Nightmare films that just is very uncommon. And I think a lot of that, again, goes back to what you all kind of started with, which is it's the connection to the characters, which in my King of Transitions connects me to my first pick, which is Dream Warriors. And I don't think it's surprising that Dream Warriors, like I don't think anyone watching this is like, oh, I'm surprised by Dream Warriors being at anyone's top. But I think what hasn't been said yet about it, which I think matters, it's what I resonate with, is these are damaged people. These are people that reflect people like myself and others. And they're not presented in a way that makes them they're not guilty of something that's made them this way. Life and things that beyond their control have made them this way. And so you're seeing this struggle between, and not to mention, it's one of the few films that deals with mental health at a time where we were actually letting people out of institutions and populating the streets with people who needed care. Like, there is a very serious discussion, and it's handled without joking. Like, there is some humor in Dream Warriors, but it is very mild, and it's not like what it becomes in 4. But in 3, these are real people with real problems that resonate, and Nancy is a champion for the other. And that's what I think when you watch Dream Warriors, that's what you get from it. This is what everyone who wanted to fight back would do. And so the helpless feeling empowered, everything about it just made me, I mean, there are some things that are problematic, the whole I wish I could walk thing. Like, I think in hindsight now, we have a different appreciation of this ability where we would feel more comfortable with these things, but it still was willing to have and show characters that you wouldn't see. They're not all attractive. They're not all perfect. They're not all there just to be fodder for Freddy. They really are people who you do care about and you want to see survive. And you can relate to any of them and all of them at the same time. And I think that there's something to that. And I look at every sequel in relation to Dream Warriors because it's the perfect sequel when you think about what a sequel should be. It doubles down on what works. It expands the universe in a meaningful way, and it gives you more characters to care about beyond the original cast. And frankly, I think Lowell might have said this, but Nancy is the best final girl. So just having her around there, it means it's so unique and singular in a franchise as full of sequels that, again, varying degrees of quality, not even Nightmare, but just in general, horror sequels tend to really fail at doing what Dream Warriors did. And it's the third one, like that you usually don't get that many chances. So I will always watch it. It is comfort food. It is the Kentucky Fried Chicken of the Nightmare series, because I can just always put it on and I will never feel bad about it. Well, in Kentucky Fried Chicken, I might feel a little bad after a while, but like Nightmare, you'll never get like too full of how good it is. And I was curious to, it sounds like 5 might be the one that everyone secretly loves more than most, but I'm curious, is there any others that you want to sound the alarm on, saying this sequel is not getting enough, like it's not getting enough of anyone's attention, and it deserves a revisit? Or are they all pretty much spoken for?
I you know what, I feel like whenever I have this discussion in regards to like ranking all of the films, I always joke that my ranking changes often because each film is individually good. You like it for a different reason. Like, people can bag on part 6 for things. They're like, oh, he's too funny, he's too this, he's too that. But I would say, I bet at one point you loved it. And at one point you have a memory with it where you saw it and you were loving it and it was great, right? Focus in on that. Or, oh, I don't like 2 because it doesn't follow the genre, it breaks the rules. Okay, what about part 1? Part 1 broke the rules. Nancy pulled him out. Maybe he's trapped in the house because Nancy pulled him out. Do you ever think of that? So I think that for me, like, I think that I love each film individually for its own reason, and so I always go back and forth on when ranking them and stuff like that. So for me, I feel like they all have love. I feel like everyone I feel like they all shine in their own way. And over time, like part 2 had its renaissance, right? Like, now if we can get Wes Craven's New Nightmare to have its renaissance, or if we could have part 5 or part 6, I think each film recirculates as people watch them more or revisit the franchise and the series. And I think they find the love, you find the love for the new ones that you like. But I don't know. So for me, there's something I could really highlight.
Yeah, and I agree with Paige. I mean, they're all likable or lovable for their own particular reasons. And I mean, for years I always go back between part 3 and 7 because they're just, and they're so different too. There's reasons I like both for different reasons why I like both. But you know, like I enjoy Freddy's Dead. I thought it was fun. You know, I don't have anything against it. I know a lot of people do, or they didn't like it, or they thought it was too campy or goofy. But you know, I really enjoyed seeing like the background, you know, like Alice Cooper's character kind of coming in, and you know, and even just like the goofy characters like Roseanne and Tom Arnold showing up, like, I want my kid back. It's just, I don't know, I love that. So yeah, I think they're all really lovable movies. I just think it just depends on the personality of the person's personal experience at that time that they're watching it.
I do think 6 should get a little more love, but then again, I can't look at it objectively because it's the first horror movie I ever saw. It's the movie that got me into horror and into movies. And when I saw it, it was like the coolest thing ever. It, you know, like you said, it's comfort food. And it also thematically ties the series together because it's revealed that he's a parent, you know, and, you know, I don't think that was part of the original plan, but the whole series is about revenge against the parents. And you find out that he, you know, he's the Ouroboros of vengeance. And I will say something else that I realized Wes Craven's brilliance later, after however many views of the original Nightmare, was that it was like this moment where I was like, oh my God. And I started doing like a slow clap when I was watching it. But Nancy doesn't actually take him out of the dream in the original Nightmare. And I like it really, no, rewatch it. The last time she's in the waking world is when the countdown on her watch is going. That's why she pulls him into like the house. But then you see like Marge go into the bed, and then like he comes out of it. And that's when she realizes, no, I'm still in the dream and I have control, which like is something that like, even saying it now, it's like, no, like she takes him out. That's how we knew how to kill him later. But
You're
no,
kind of blowing my mind right now.
what?
Wow. Okay, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I will.
But like, yeah, but just like, I didn't think this series could surprise. I don't think I was in college when that happened, and you know, they'd been like out like 20 years at that point. And I'm like, I think I've seen everything, and I've seen like every little nook and cranny, but like that still surprised me. So thanks for coming to my Fred talk.
No, and it makes sense if you think about it, because like one of the things we see a lot in the movies is, you know, they just start to nod off. They're like, oh, are they really asleep or are they awake? You know, you don't know. So why couldn't it be the reverse in the first one? So I like that.
It's the best part about these movies, honestly, is it's more than the surface. And it's like it's really hard to unpack a Friday the 13th movie because there's nothing below it. It's exactly what it tells you it is, for better or worse. Whereas these ask questions that, you know, you can think about. And I'll agree with Lowell here that Freddy's Dead does not get enough love. But I also think that folks around our age have an appreciation for it because it came out right at that perfect time when like our memories are kind of becoming really solidified. We're able to kind of remember things better. And it's your, you know, your first horror movie may not always be your first franchise film, or you see in a theater, you kind of remember, may not be the best movie of all time, but it always imprints on you something that you'll never forget. And I still don't understand why people haven't even chalked it up to like being just like a corny, like if we're going to give The Room all of this credit as some sort of underground, you know, cult classic, why aren't we giving Freddy's Dead, which has camp for days and has an amazing cast that is delivering more seriousness to a script than probably it deserves. So there's a lot there that I think it's overlooked rather. But you're all right that there's no bad, like this franchise is solid. And even Freddy versus Jason, while it may not be within canon, it's probably the best mashup between two major characters we're ever going to get. That's not a superhero movie. And that's a lot to do for horror, because horror is messy and doesn't play nice with other franchises as well. But they shows that where there's a will and there's a decade plus worth of scripting, there's a way.
They are my superheroes.
The slasher icons are my Avengers, but I think that's a lot of horror fans. And as we're kind of coming to a close, I want to first and foremost thank you both for being here and sharing, Fred Heads with us, but also this conversation and just hearing the points of view. Where can people expect to see Fred Heads, and what can anyone do to support it?
Well, right now, we are about to have our world premiere at HORRORHOUND Convention in Cincinnati on September 11th. The red carpet starts at 1 o'clock. And so we are asking people to, if you're going to show up, line up, because we can't guarantee seats. And as far as like a wide release distribution, we're just going to have to wait. We've got some exciting news that we legally cannot talk about yet. So
Amazing. Well, we will definitely, spread the word as best as we can. Having us both seen it, I can say firsthand that, again, there's nothing that makes you feel less alone and more connected to people you've never met than watching a documentary with people just like yourself, talking about the things that you love as much as, and they love them just as much as you do. So you cannot put a price on that. And I just can't put the endorsement enough on this documentary, because as you all said, there's not a lot of documentaries that look at this from the fan perspective and do it in such a way that brings you into the conversation rather than feeling like it's being, there's a documentary about movie hoarders out there that feels more like, kind of like a Natural Geographic thing where it's like, oh, look at these hoarders and how they operate, versus this feels as in a deep appreciation. So we'll do whatever we can to promote it. It's a long way of me saying. And it was wonderful to have you both. And we hope you can have this conversation again when the DVD or the Blu-ray, I don't find myself saying DVD showing my age. If there's a Blu-ray release, you can see behind that I'm I think all of us are collectors at heart of physical media. So we will clearly support it anywhere and any way we can.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Well, we look forward to having you all back. And Lowell, any parting comments, sentiments?
I kind of can't believe this happened. And now someone other than my wife gets to hear what I've said about the Nightmare on Elm Street series to such a degree. She asked for it. She's like, you love these movies, you have to show me all of them. And at the time I'm like, we just started dating. I'm like, all of them? She's like, no, all of them. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, all of them. Yeah.
Mandatory.
When you get that intro, you take it. And that's my experience. My wife ever said, show me your favorite horror movies, I wouldn't even ask questions. Just how much time you got and when can we start? But
Born.
Well, I'm sure by the next time we do this, Lowell will be too famous to be able to do a monthly session with me. So, but thank you all. We wish you all the best of success with this. Truly, it's so wonderful to speak to creators who are also fans, but are also giving fans a voice in a time when we need more connection. We need connection more than ever. So we'll keep an eye out for Fred Heads from myself here in Cleveland. Stay safe, be good, and watch horror movies.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.